Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the walled heart of the Ottoman Empire. Not through its glittering halls or secretive harems, but out back, where the flowers bloom, the water flows, and someone has to clean up after the peacocks. That someone is you. You're a palace gardener at Topkapi, the royal nerve center of Istanbul, where a single dead tulip might be grounds for execution. And guess what? You just overslept. The air is warm and sweet with a hint of rosewater, and the pale blue sky above the palace has already shifted to a sharper, sunlit hue. Birds are chirping like they're getting paid for it. You, however, are not. You're curled up on a rough cotton mat in the servants' quarters, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells vaguely of soup and crushed mint. A muffled clang from the copper kitchen bells jolts you awake. Late. Very late. You jolt upright so fast you smack your head on the bunk above you. Classic. Rubbing your scalp and cursing softly under your breath, in a pious way of course, you scramble to your feet. No time to wash properly. You splash your face from a clay basin, the water shockingly cold, and yank on your gardener's sash. It's greenish now, once emerald, now closer to pond scum. But it marks you as part of the royal horticultural staff, which, according to the scribes, is an honored and time-honored role. You argue that expendable and dirty might be more accurate. Your sandals are nowhere to be found. One is under the bunk, the other mysteriously in a soup pot. You yank them on and lurch into the hallway, brushing shoulders with yawning scullions, a dizzy-looking washer boy, and a janissary guard who gives you that look, the one that says, "You again." There's no breakfast. There's no schedule. There's just the panic knot in your stomach and the very real possibility that if the tulip beds weren't watered at dawn, someone in a jeweled turban will have your head by noon. Historians still argue whether the Sultan himself ever strolled through the gardens before sunrise to inspect his prized blooms, but you're not about to take that risk. Your workday was supposed to begin 2 hours ago, and in a palace where even the sleep cycles are managed by court astrologers, time isn't just money, it's power. Somewhere, the muezzin's voice echoes over the city's rooftops, calling the devout to prayer. You whisper a quick bismillah, then belt your sash tighter and run. Now you're weaving through the labyrinthine back corridors of the palace, the air thick with damp stone, bread-baking aromas, and yesterday's incense. Every turn offers a new obstacle, an overturned laundry cart, a pair of fighting pigeons, and a line of concubines quietly shuffling toward the bathhouse, their veils shimmering like fish scales in the morning light. You bow your head, avert your gaze. One of them giggles. You trip over a chamber pot. By the time you reach the courtyard gate, your lungs are burning. The guard there, Iskender, an old janissary with 3 teeth and no sense of humor, stops you with a raised eyebrow. "Rough morning?" he asks, not moving an inch. "I overslept," you pant. "Again." He snorts. "You palace boys with your cushions and your fig jam. Try standing guard all night with a louse in your boots." You nod like that's a totally relatable complaint, then inch past him before he changes his mind. Beyond the gate lies the true empire within the empire, the royal gardens. They're not just for show. These gardens are sacred, an intricate tapestry of floral beds, medicinal herb spirals, shaded walkways, whispering water channels, and fruit groves. It's said that even the great Suleiman the Magnificent once wept when a prized tulip species went extinct here. Whether that's true or a gardener's tale, nobody laughs when a flower dies on duty. Tulips, by the way, are everything. Ottoman nobles are obsessed with them. They breed them, name them, gift them, paint them, write poetry about them. There's even a rumor going around that the court astrologers scheduled last week's royal wedding to coincide with a specific tulip's bloom cycle. Frin? Absolutely. But it checks out. Anyway, you make it to the tulip section, just barely. The sun is now slanting low across the mosaic paths, and the dew has mostly dried. Too late for proper dawn watering. You grab your dented copper jug, dip it into the marble basin, and start at once, fanning out water in arcs that are more panic than precision. The blooms themselves are stunning. Tall stalks of red, purple, and rare striated whites, arranged in geometric perfection. They smell like the promise of spring and an extremely fragile career. You scan them quickly. No obvious wilting, thank God. A few slumped heads here and there, but nothing a bit of fluffing and finger tucking won't fix. That's when you hear it, the unmistakable scrape of velvet slippers on stone. Not loud, just important sounding. You drop the jug, scramble to your knees, and begin fussing with a patch of soil like it's your life's work. Because if that's who you think it is, and it usually is, you're about to get inspected. Behind you a shadow falls. A voice high and smooth says, "Still clumsy, gardener." You turn, it's the palace steward. He's wearing 4 rings and a facial expression like he smells something mildly offensive. He flicks his sleeve, eyes the tulips, then eyes you. "Water," he says, "should have been drawn before Fajr prayer." "I had to clear a beehive," you lie, "urgently." "Bees," he repeats, unimpressed. "Yes, in the harem window frames." A pause, then a sigh. "If I find a single petal out of symmetry when the Sultan walks today, I'll personally assign you to the dung pits. Again." He glides off, leaving a wake of rose oil scent and judgment. You sit back on your heels, exhale slowly, and allow yourself one thought. It's going to be a very long day. You rise with a grunt, brushing dirt from your knees, though it only rearranges the smudges rather than removes them. The tulips look presentable for now. No thanks to the crow that's been eyeing them from the cypress tree like it's planning floral sabotage. You make a mental note to find something shiny to distract it with later. Maybe one of the broken concubine bracelets from the laundry courtyard. Now you head for the harem courtyard. Not because you're allowed there, you're very much not, but because the fastest route to the southeast irrigation spout cuts right through its marbled corridor. Technically, you have permission as long as you do loiter, gawk, or smell weird. You're already failing at least one of those. As you duck through a vine-laced archway, the mood shifts. The air smells sweeter here, jasmine, lavender, and an underlying perfume you can't name. You pause just long enough to admire how sunlight filters through a lattice of fig leaves overhead, dappling the tiles like a mosaic come to life. Then a eunuch passes, arching one eyebrow so high it nearly disappears into his turban. You nod politely and press forward. The harem is waking slowly. You pass women shuffling in soft slippers, some still wrapped in their sleeping shawls, others already laughing in the alcoves, trading secrets or braiding hair like they have all the time in the world. You envy their pace, even if their lives are just as controlled as yours, maybe more. One of them breaks from her group, walking toward you with the unmistakable confidence of someone who's seen too many men fumble and fall flat. She wears a silk robe the color of pomegranate juice and carries a bowl of almonds. "Gardener," she says. You freeze mid-step, trying to avoid looking directly at her while also not appearing rude. It's an advanced form of social yoga. "Yes, esteemed lady," you ask, your voice cracking slightly. "Your sash is on backwards." You glance down. It is fantastic. "Oh," you say, "a test for airflow." She smirks. "Of course, airflow." Then she tosses an almond at you and walks off before you can decide whether that was flirtation, mockery, or some harem ritual of public humiliation. Historians still argue whether Ottoman concubines wielded genuine political power or were more like highly perfumed prisoners. All you know is, they're terrifying. You munch the almond and continue on. The corridor curves toward the inner fountain court, where white marble gleams under the rising sun, and a pair of parrots argue noisily from a perch near the bathhouse. You duck past a column and nearly barrel into your fellow gardener, Hassan, the tall one with the unfortunate mustache and an affinity for pruning knives. "Late again," he mutters, not looking at you as he snips at a rosebush with the delicacy of a jeweler. You don't bother denying it. "What's the damage?" Hassan shrugs. "No dead flowers, just bruised pride, yours." Then he adds, "Also, head gardener is in a mood. Something about the Persian hyacinths." You groan. The Persian hyacinths are the palace's pride during early spring. They're also extremely fragile, spiteful little divas who wilt if you so much as glance at them in the wrong tone. You remember trying to transplant one last season. It responded by collapsing in protest and cost you a week of drainage ditch duty. Better hustle, Hassan says, nodding toward the far end of the courtyard. You break into a half jog, dodging a food tray someone's left on the floor, dates, boiled eggs, and some kind of fish paste, and nearly trip on a tortoise lazily meandering across the path. You're about to move it when a voice behind you says, "Let it be. It belongs to the astrologer." You whirl around to see the chief astrologer himself, emerging like a storm cloud in velvet robes embroidered with stars. He holds a scroll and a silver disc covered in strange notches and symbols. "The tortoise," he continues, "carries Saturn's energy. It brings calm to the eastern sector. You'd be wise not to interfere." "Of course, honored one," you reply, stepping away from the creature as it resumes its leisurely shuffle, possibly toward cosmic enlightenment or a fig. The astrologer narrows his eyes. "Mars is in conjunction with Venus today. You should water with your left hand." You blink. "My left." "Left invites harmony, right invites wasps." He sweeps off dramatically, robes fluttering. You half expect thunder to roll behind him. You glance at the tortoise. It stops, blinks, then keeps walking. "Great," you mutter. "Now I've got planetary responsibilities." By the time you reach the irrigation valve near the spice corridor, you're already sweating. The lever is jammed as usual, so you whack it with a sandal and pray the water gods are listening. Eventually, it gives with a groan, and the water channels burble to life, trickling into the main flower lanes. You squat nearby, pretending to check soil acidity with your finger, a trick the older gardeners taught you, mostly for show. In reality, your hands are too callous to feel anything subtle, but you nod sagely, just in case anyone's watching. There's a moment of peace, finally. The babble of water, the rustle of fig leaves, and the distant clank of breakfast trays being collected. You sit back, breathing in the scent of warm earth and flowering sage, and you think, maybe I'll survive this day. Then a shout echoes across the courtyard. "You, gardener!" You flinch, not again. It's the head gardener, of course. He's stomping toward you like an angry fig merchant, waving a sprig of something at you like it's proof of your criminal incompetence. "Who," he demands, "put wormwood in the rose border?" You blink. I didn't touch the roses today." "Exactly, you didn't touch them, so how did wormwood get there?" "Maybe," you try, "maybe it walked over." "Bad joke," he doesn't laugh. "You've got 10 minutes to fix it," he snaps, before the steward comes back with that horrible magnifying glass. He storms off, trailing petals. You stare at the sprig in his hand. Wormwood, not dangerous but unsightly in rose beds, probably planted by some apprentice looking to cut corners, or maybe as a prank, or maybe by a rival gardener hoping you'd be blamed. Historians still argue whether palace sabotage among lower staff was rampant or exaggerated. Either way, the wormwood's your problem now. You sigh, stand up, and dust off your knees again. Time to start weeding, and probably do it with your left hand. Thanks, Saturn tortoise. The wormwood is tougher than it looks. You yank one stalk out and it brings a whole cluster of soil with it, including half a beetle colony and, inexplicably, someone's bronze earring. Probably lost during last week's garden poetry contest. Yes, that's a thing. Some vizier's nephew read a sonnet to a lily, cried, and then tripped into the mint beds. You chuck the wormwood into the compost sack and whisper apologies to the roses. You know you're not supposed to talk to the plants, but everyone does it. You pat the soil down, smooth out the mulch, and fluff a petal or two just to be safe. Crisis averted for now. You barely get a moment to stretch your back before someone clears their throat behind you. You freeze, expecting another tongue lashing. But it's not the head gardener. It's the palace steward's young apprentice, Mustafa, maybe 15, eyes wide like a startled deer, and constantly on the verge of a voice crack. "Gardener," he squeaks, "the Sultan's tulip beds are due for inspection." "You blink, didn't we just?" "No," he says gravely. "Those were the ceremonial tulips. These are the imperial tulips." "Oh, of course, because the Sultan can't just have one plot of tulips. No, that would be too Ottoman." You grab your tools, pruning scissors, a watering flask, and a soft camel hair brush for dusting petals. Then you follow Mustafa through a gate flanked by calligraphy panels and fig trees, so symmetrical it's like they were negotiated into position. The imperial tulip beds are in a secluded quadrant of the gardens, behind a wall of cypress and flanked by fountains that burble in perfect rhythm. You know this area well, because it's where careers go to either blossom or die. The tulips here aren't just flowers, they're political statements. Each bulb was imported, crossbred, and logged with ceremonial precision. One of them, the violet-black one at the center, is so rare it has its own bodyguard, a silent janissary who stands near it like it's a state secret. There's a rumor the Sultan named that flower after his favorite horse. Another says it's named after a dream he had. Historians still argue whether tulips were used in coded palace messages or if that's just romantic nonsense. You begin your inspection slowly. Brush each bloom, check the soil, pinch out a leaf that's browning slightly, just enough to fix the symmetry without alarming anyone. You keep your shoulders relaxed, your movements smooth, like a very sleepy surgeon. A breeze shifts the petals and the scent rises. Honey, citrus, something floral but sharp. You remember your mentor once saying that tulips smell different when they're nervous. You think he was joking. You hope he was joking. Suddenly Mustafa says, "He's coming." You freeze. Who? Mustafa doesn't need to answer. The gate opens. 3 eunuchs glide in first, followed by a steward holding a golden flask. Then comes the Sultan. You keep your eyes low, not out of fear exactly, but protocol. You've only glimpsed him once before, at a distance during the Shadow Festival. Even then, you mostly saw his sleeves and a very well-fed hawk perched on his wrist. Now you catch only fragments, polished slippers, a deep green robe embroidered with gold vines, and the glint of a curved dagger shaped like a flower stem. He moves slowly, with the confidence of someone whose entire empire trims itself around his mood. He stops near the violet-black tulip. Silence. You can practically hear your own sweat forming. The Sultan leans slightly, gestures, and murmurs something to his steward. The steward nods. Then the Sultan steps away and vanishes into the next courtyard. Just like that, like a breeze, like a dream. Mustafa exhales. You realize you'd been holding your breath. "What did he say?" you whisper. Mustafa's voice trembles. He said, "It leans slightly to the left." You stare at the tulip. It does lean slightly, by maybe half a degree. You adjust the soil, straighten it just enough. Disaster averted again. The janissary gives a nod so small you might have imagined it. Then he resumes his silent vigil over the tulip. You, meanwhile, collapse onto a bench behind the rose trellis and pretend you're adjusting your sandals. Every muscle in your back aches, and the day isn't even halfway done. A short while later, the steward reappears. "The Sultan is pleased," he says flatly. "You may continue your duties." You nod, "Gratefully, my lord." He walks away without a second glance. That's the thing about palace work. No one notices you until something goes wrong. A dead bloom, a leaning tulip, a muddy walkway, and suddenly your name is flying through the corridors like a cursed whisper. But when it goes right, you just keep going. You sling your tool kit back over your shoulder and make your way out of the imperial quadrant, dodging another group of eunuchs who are escorting a baby goat. Don't ask. You learned never to ask. You pause to check a patch of chamomile near the physician's quarters, mostly to gather yourself. The petals sway lazily. One is missing. You stare at the scroll as if it might sprout legs and flee into the hedge. To the keeper of the orchard. Not sultan, not valide sultan, not even most grumpy steward of the water basins. No title you've ever heard, and you've heard a lot of titles. You flip the scroll over again. The wax seal, still unbroken, is oddly elegant. The calligraphic symbol of the bird in flight is precise, sweeping, but unfamiliar. Not a known noble crest, not an imperial cipher, maybe a guild, or something more clandestine. You scan the courtyard. A few gardeners are hauling flower pots. A scribe naps beside a patch of mint. Nobody seems to have noticed you lifting the scroll from beneath a fruit cart. Good. You tuck it into your sash beside the sandalwood parchment, which is starting to make your waistband look suspiciously lumpy, and begin walking, briskly, but not too briskly. That's how you look guilty. On the way, you detour toward the orchard, pretending you've suddenly remembered that citrus trees exist. The orchard is technically outside your rotation today, but you need answers, and maybe some oranges. The Topkapi Palace orchard is unlike any ordinary fruit grove. It's layered in levels, a lattice of fig, quince, pomegranate, and citrus trees arranged not just for fruit, but for harmony, shade, and royal picnicking aesthetics. The scent is intoxicating. Sweet citrus, earth, and ripened fruit hanging low and heavy in the heat. You duck under an arch of pomegranates and head toward the altar mentioned in the invisible scroll from earlier, the orchard altar, which is a dramatic term for a slightly raised marble slab at the orchard's center, flanked by stone lanterns and two aging olive trees. It was once used for solstice offerings or something equally mysterious, and now mostly hosts bored squirrels and sunbathing cats. You approach slowly. No movement, no birds, not even a breeze. You crouch beside the altar and pretend to adjust your sandal, then reach underneath and feel around in the shadows. Nothing. Then click. Your fingers brush something metal. You freeze, then carefully pull out a small, iron-rimmed box wrapped in oiled cloth and bound with twine. It's surprisingly heavy. You glance around again, still alone. You untie the twine. Inside, 3 tiny scrolls, each tied with a silk ribbon, a velvet pouch of what feels like seeds, and a folded cloth embroidered with that same flying bird symbol. You unfold one of the scrolls. For the next bloom, midnight first quarter moon, all paths must be cleared. The keeper watches. You sit back slowly. This is no garden prank. This is a message for someone operating under the palace's nose, someone who understands its layout intimately, someone who knows when flowers bloom, which paths are patrolled, and how to pass unseen. A gardener. No, a group of gardeners. You tuck everything back, rewrap the box, and return it carefully to its hiding place. Then you sit on the edge of the altar and pretend to check a fig leaf for disease while your thoughts race. A secret order. A blooming schedule. The keeper watches. What are they watching for? Before you can spiral too far, a familiar cough echoes behind you. Working hard or hiding well, says a voice you recognize instantly. Hassan. You turn and see him leaning against a quince tree, arms crossed, pruning knife spinning lazily between his fingers. Neither, you say, brushing dirt from your hands. Orchard rotation today, just inspecting. He walks forward. Funny, you're not on orchard duty. You shrug. The steward reassigned me after the peacock incident. He raises a skeptical brow. He reassigns a lot of things, but he's never once reassigned me from compost. You narrow your eyes. Are you suggesting I'm lying or just confused? Little of both, he says, then adds with a grin, but mostly I'm just here to warn you. That gets your attention. Warn me. Yeah, about your enthusiasm. You frown. Enthusiasm. You're noticing things, walking places you normally don't, getting involved. You freeze. How do you know? Hassan raises one finger. I've been here longer than you. I've seen other gardeners start sniffing around old rose stories and whispering trees. They all eventually disappear. You glance down at the altar. He follows your gaze. That's just marble, he says softly. But what's beneath it, that's history, and history in this place has teeth. You study his face. He's not smiling anymore. I didn't ask for any of this, you say. Doesn't matter, you're in it now. He steps back, wipes his hands on his sash, and disappears into the citrus grove with a parting line. Be careful where you dig. You sit there for a long moment, unsure whether to feel warned, threatened, or invited. A few minutes later, the tortoise shuffles into the clearing. It stops, blinks at you, then lowers its head as if in respect. You nod back. Yeah, you probably know everything, don't you? It blinks again, then wanders off. You rise, stretch your legs, and head toward the fountain courtyard to fulfill your actual orders, scrubbing moss off the steward's favorite marble fountain. But even as you pass through rows of jasmine and myrtle, your thoughts remain fixed on the altar, the scrolls, and that phrase. The keeper watches. Somewhere in this palace, someone knows more than you. And you're starting to think they've been watching you too. You arrive at the steward's fountain with the enthusiasm of a man heading to a public beheading, his own. It's one of those overly decorative fountains, marble lions spouting water from curled tongues, cherubic faces carved into the edges, and a tiled base so elaborate it probably required a small army of tile cutters and a priest to finish. But none of that matters to the steward. What matters is the moss, the shameful, accusatory moss that creeps between the tiles like a criminal under cloak of dew. You kneel beside the basin and sigh. The moss isn't even thick, just a dusting, really, a fuzzy green whisper, but to the steward it might as well be a rebellion. You dip your brush into the vinegar water mix and begin scrubbing with mindless repetition. Circles, corners, rinse, scrub again. It's the kind of task that gives your brain just enough space to start replaying recent events, which, in your case, is a problem. A secret society, hidden messages, a second scroll sealed with a bird crest, and Hassan warning you off like a man who's seen too many curious souls turned into compost. Your brush hits something hard. You pause, pry at the spot between two tiles, and lift out a pebble that doesn't belong. It's smooth, circular, and carved like a coin, but thinner. On one side, a stylized almond blossom. On the other, a short phrase in Old Ottoman Turkish, where silence blooms. You glance up. The courtyard is empty. Even the steward hasn't shown his dramatic sleeves yet. You tuck the object into your sash, alongside the rest of your burgeoning collection of suspicious items, and resume scrubbing. Because if you're going to attract the attention of a shadowy garden cult, you'd at least like to avoid being fired first. As you work, voices drift from the upper balcony. Two court scribes, gossiping in the polite murmur of people who think no one listens. Third time this month the scrolls have gone missing, says one. It's always the citrus scrolls, the other replies, and only the ones with mapping notes. You freeze. Coincidence, says the first. Not in this palace, says the second. Word is the Valide Sultan suspects someone is trying to chart the escape tunnels. You blink. Wait, escape tunnels. You've heard stories, of course. Whispers of hidden routes beneath the palace, used in times of siege or scandal. But they were always half-truths told over burnt lentils. Now, you're holding a coin inscribed with what might be a password, two scrolls that reference secret meetings, and the sudden suspicion that you've stumbled into something older than the palace itself. You finish the fountain, rinsing the tiles and polishing the lion faces until they shine like they just got promoted. Then you stand, stretch your aching back, and turn to find, of course, the steward watching you from the archway like a disappointed father. Late, he says flatly. Technically early, you reply. I started before you showed up. He narrows his eyes, and yet it's not perfect. You look back at the gleaming fountain. You can literally see your reflection in the marble. What would make it perfect, my lord? He steps forward and points at the tiniest scrap of moss tucked into a lion's ear. You sigh, of course, the ear. He grunts, royal ears must never be green. You nod solemnly, I will never forget this wisdom. He marches off in the direction of the pigeon loft, robes swishing, already planning his next battle against nature. You pluck the last speck of moss from the lion's ear and flick it into the garden. Then, without really deciding to, you start walking toward the northwest edge of the palace grounds, where the older gardens sit. The ones no longer kept in bloom, their fountains dry, their paths cracked. The ones people politely avoid. You've never had official business here. No one does, but you've heard whispers. A fig tree that bears fruit out of season. A sundial that points at midnight. A well that reflects things it shouldn't. You pass through an iron gate warped by time and duck under a thicket of brambles. The ground shifts beneath your feet, from soft, tended earth to something older, rockier, forgotten. And there it is, the old reflecting pool. No longer filled with water, only leaves and silence. Ivy crawls up the carved balustrades, and a half-collapsed arbor sags under the weight of ancient grapevines. In the center stands a broken pedestal. On it, barely legible through the moss, where silence blooms. The same phrase as on the coin. You approach slowly, heart pounding. There's something buried beneath the ivy at the base of the pedestal. You kneel, pull back vines, and uncover a stone tile with an inset symbol, the same burden flight crest from the scroll seal. You press the coin into the symbol's center. Nothing happens. Then a click, a faint shift in the air. You push, the tile gives way. A hollow chamber yawns open beneath it. Inside, a small cavity no larger than a shoebox, and inside that a folded cloth bundle. You lift it out, unwrap it with trembling hands. Inside, a map, hand-drawn, old. It shows the palace grounds and what lies beneath them. A ring bearing the almond blossom crest. A scrap of parchment with a single line. If you have found this, the garden trusts you. You sit back on your heels, stunned. Somewhere behind you, a twig snaps. You spin around. No one. Just the quiet whisper of grapevines in the breeze. And the knowledge that someone, some many, have walked this path before you. You are not the first. And now you are part of it. You sit motionless at the edge of the reflecting pool for a long minute, clutching the cloth bundle to your chest like it might sprout wings and vanish if you blink too hard. The breeze has shifted. The air smells different, not wrong, just ancient. A mix of crushed ivy, dried pomegranate rind, and old paper dreams. It's the scent of secrets, and now it's clinging to your skin. You look again at the map, unfolding it with the care of someone disarming a trap. The parchment is brittle at the edges, but the ink holds strong, confident lines, purposeful curves. Someone wanted this to last. At the center, the palace is drawn with precise geometry. Gardens, pavilions, fountains, kitchens, walls. But then beneath it all, an entirely different layer. Tunnels, chambers, marked paths that curve and intersect like root systems, as if the palace is just the flower and this is the stem. And at the very bottom corner of the map, in faded red ink, Keeper's Garden, accessible only through silence. You trace the lines with your finger and they seem to hum beneath your touch. Not literally, but close, like the parchment remembers things you don't. You carefully rewrap the bundle, slide it back into your sash, which at this point is less clothing and more contraband storage, and rise to your feet. You scan the area again, still quiet, still alone. Or are you? Because now you feel it. That feeling you get when someone's watching you, not maliciously, not even curiously, just knowingly, like a parent watching a child finally choose the right door. You don't look over your shoulder. Instead, you start walking back toward the main gardens. But as you reach the cracked path leading out of the overgrown section, you spot something tucked into the base of a laurel shrub. A folded slip of fabric, small, square, embroidered, like a handkerchief but purposeful. You pick it up. It bears the flying bird crest, again. But on the other side, stitched in delicate, trembling thread. Water the silence at dusk. Okay, sure. Because vague poetry is exactly what your day needed more of. You tuck it into your now dangerously overstuffed sash and return to the herb spiral. The sun is starting to dip lower, casting everything in that buttery gold light that makes even the compost pile look slightly noble. You still have actual work to do, if only to keep suspicion off your trail. You get to it. Snipping basil, fluffing mint, crouching beside a bed of marjoram that appears to be sulking. Everything smells clean, sharp, grounded, like it's trying to remind you that yes, you're still just a gardener. But now every movement feels doubled. Every herb has meaning. Every flower bed might be a threshold. You glance toward the lavender patch where you first found that blank scroll. A small tortoise has taken up residence there again, staring at a leaf like it's deciphering ancient runes. You nod in its direction. It doesn't respond, but you suspect that's a power move. Then a voice drifts toward you, soft, curious, familiar. Find anything good in the roses today. It's Harun, teacup in one hand, eyebrows raised. You stand, brushing soil from your palms. Only several existential crises and possibly an invitation to a secret horticultural rebellion. He tilts his head. That many, and it's not even sunset. You glance around, lower your voice. Harun, does the palace have tunnels, real ones underneath? He doesn't blink, doesn't smile. Instead, he sips his tea and says, depends on what you mean by real. I found a map. Did you? I think it's a map. That's usually how they start. You blink, so you know about it. He sighs. Gardener, he says, using your title like a cloak. There are things in this palace that are only visible once you start asking questions. Doors that appear when you stop speaking. People who exist only in the pauses between meetings. You raise an eyebrow. That's helpful. It wasn't meant to be. He sets the teacup on the rim of a nearby flower basin and steps closer. I will say this, the keeper of the orchard isn't a person. Not exactly, it's a role, a mantle. Like a title. Harun nods, passed quietly, unofficially, chosen, not inherited. Chosen by whom? The garden. You frown, you're making this up. He chuckles. I wish I were, but no, the garden chooses, it watches, it waits. That's incredibly vague. It is a garden cult, after all. You want to laugh, but you can't. Because the weight of the scroll in your sash, the map, the handkerchief, the coin, they're all too real. So what happens, you ask, if the garden chooses you? Harun looks at you, his gaze suddenly sharp, focused, stripped of his usual humor. Then you stop gardening for flowers, he says, and start gardening for truth. The tortoise sneezes in the background. You nod slowly, unsure whether to feel honored or doomed. Harun claps you on the shoulder. Better start cleaning your tools. If you really are the next keeper, the garden's going to test you. Tonight. You blink, tonight. At dusk, you know the time of day when poems get dramatic. You glance at the sky. The sun has dipped halfway behind the palace walls. Shadows are starting to stretch. Where do I go, you ask? He picks up his teacup and shrugs. You'll know, just don't speak. What happens if I do? He smiles. Then the garden will assume you're not ready. And with that, he strolls away, sipping tea, as if he hasn't just upended your entire worldview in 5 minutes. You kneel back beside the herbs, but you don't see them anymore. You're listening to You shuffle away from the imperial tulips with your shoulders hunched like a defeated tortoise. Your nerves are frayed, your sash is now entirely unsalvageable, and you've just spent 20 heart-thumping minutes dodging death by flower. But there's no time to relax. In Topkapi Palace, triumph is never the end of anything. It just means the next crisis gets to arrive on schedule. And that schedule is now. 3 different voices call your name from 3 different directions the moment you step into the central herb garden. One belongs to the head gardener, naturally. The other is the palace steward again, now clearly in a worse mood than before. And the third, oh no, is the astrologer. You freeze like a hunted deer in a saffron-scented clearing. Each of these men technically outranks you. Each has a completely different job, and each thinks you should drop everything and help them right now. You do what any skilled Ottoman gardener/palace survivor would do. Pick whichever direction has the most shade and start walking. Unfortunately, that leads you straight to the astrologer, who's crouching beside a young pomegranate tree and frowning at it as if it owes him money. "You," he says, not looking at you, "do you feel anything unusual here?" You glance around. There's a bee hovering above the blossoms and the tree looks healthy. Slight dryness in the soil. "No," he huffs, "I mean cosmically." "Ah, of course." He stands, robe flowing, and gestures to the sky. Mars and Jupiter crossed paths at dawn. This tree should be leaning northwest, not northeast. You blink, sir, it's a tree. "A royal tree," he snaps. "Planted under lunar auspices in 1542. It must align with imperial energy flows. You read the scroll I sent, didn't you?" You absolutely did not. That scroll was 16 feet long and smelled like wet goat. "Yes, of course," you lie. "Riveting section on lunar sap pressure." He nods solemnly. "Good. Then you'll know why it needs to be rotated exactly 4 degrees. Rotated." He waves a dismissive hand. "Not the trunk, fool, the soil aura." You nod like that's a real thing. He hands you a pouch of powdered cloves and crushed pearls. "Spread this. Meditate. Water it only with collected dew for the next 5 mornings, and don't let the tortoise near it." You resist the urge to ask if the tortoise is still Saturn-themed. You bow, take the pouch, and back away, smiling politely as you make a mental note to water it like normal and pretend the ritual worked. The astrologer is probably too distracted by Jupiter's vibes to notice either way. As you retreat, the head gardener intercepts you with the speed and fury of a man who hasn't had breakfast and just stepped in peacock droppings. "You missed the herb spiral check," he growls, brandishing a list that appears to have been angrily rewritten in charcoal. "Do you know what happens when rosemary isn't trimmed weekly?" "History forgets us," you offer. He glares. "It invades the time beds." Which, apparently, is a national tragedy. "You're being reassigned. No more tulips for now. You'll handle herb maintenance for the rest of the day." You nod. It could be worse. At least herbs don't lean in politically dangerous directions. And he adds, "The steward wants the fountain moss scraped." Of course he does. And the steward's voice cuts in from behind a column. "You forgot to clean the turtle pond yesterday." Now that gets a reaction. The head gardener turns to the steward. "I assigned him to flower rotations. Turtle pond is your jurisdiction." The garden map clearly states. "Oh, please, you're still using last month's map." Their bickering escalates with the passion of a centuries-old blood feud, and you quietly step backward, clutching the pearl clove pouch like it might explode. No one notices you leave. They're now arguing about whether lavender counts as an herb or a flower. Historians still argue the same thing, though with less shouting. You head back toward the herb spiral, passing a mosaic-tiled wall with vines creeping over it like they're trying to spell something. In the center of the spiral, the rosemary has indeed grown wild, bullying the neighboring thyme and looking smug about it. You begin trimming. The scent hits you immediately, sharp, woody, like a memory of roasted lamb from the palace kitchens. You clip carefully, making sure not to bruise the leaves. That's the difference between a novice and a pro. Well, that and knowing how to fake a broken ankle to avoid latrine duty. As you prune, a bee buzzes lazily past your ear, circles your shoulder like it's judging your technique, then wanders off. You think about the astrologer's nonsense. Mars and Venus, left hand watering, soil aura rotation. But deep down, you suspect most of these plants thrive not because of cosmic alignment, but because of hardworking people like you, sweating under the Ottoman sun and getting yelled at by 4 supervisors before breakfast. Still, it's oddly peaceful. The warm air, the steady snip of shears, the scent of sage and chamomile drifting around your ankles. You hum a song your mother used to sing when tending the fig trees back home. Something about patience and onions. You never really understood the metaphor, but it always helped the plants grow. Then you spot something, a parchment wedged under the base of a lavender bush. It's rolled tightly and tied with a red string. You glance around, no one's watching. You pick it up, frowning. It's blank. No writing, no markings, just clean parchment slightly scented with sandalwood. Strange, you pocket it for later. Palace gardens are full of secrets. Most are harmless, some not so much. You get back to trimming. A few minutes later, the tortoise ambles by. You salute it. It blinks at you, then keeps walking. The tortoise disappears behind a pomegranate bush like it's got a lunch appointment with destiny, and you're left wondering how it always seems to know where it's going. You've lived at the palace for 4 years and still get lost between the laundry quarters and the pigeon loft. You tuck the mysterious scroll deeper into your sash and wipe your forehead with a sleeve that now smells of thyme, rosemary, and existential dread. You've still got at least 6 more plots to tend, not to mention the moss that allegedly disgraced the steward's fountain. But first, you need tea, or possibly divine intervention, whichever arrives faster. You trudge toward the east corner of the gardens where a shaded stone bench offers a view of the koi pond, the moon gate, and more importantly, the tiny, unofficial tea house run by one of the eunuchs. This particular eunuch, Harun, is a walking contradiction. Soft-spoken but razor-witted, perpetually sleepy but alarmingly well-informed. Nobody knows how he gets his tea leaves or his gossip, but his corner of the palace is where information flows more freely than the aqueducts. And for now, he's your safe haven. You round the hibiscus hedge and spot him already sitting cross-legged with a steaming pot in hand, reading an illustrated manuscript and occasionally scoffing at the calligraphy. Harun, you say, dropping onto the bench beside him with the grace of a falling bag of compost. I may have just committed accidental political sabotage via herb spiral. He doesn't look up, so a regular Tuesday. You sigh, there's also a scroll involved. Now he looks at you. You pull the parchment from your sash and place it on the bench between you. Harun raises an eyebrow, pokes it with a chopstick, then nods approvingly. Sandalwood, that's not regular inventory parchment. Too expensive, likely imported. It's blank. For you, he says, hold it up to the sun. You do, and there it is. Barely visible, delicate lines of Ottoman script forming a short message. He leans over your shoulder and reads it aloud in a conspiratorial whisper. Delivery confirmed. Second batch hidden beneath the orchard altar. Await further signal. You both stare at the message for a long moment. Spies, you whisper. He sips his tea, almost definitely. Why hide it in the lavender bed? He shrugs. Good scent. Hard to sniff out a traitor through a cloud of flowers. You feel a cold knot twist in your gut. Not because of the espionage. There's always espionage in the palace. But because now you're holding proof of it. And this is not the kind of garden surprise that earns you a commendation. This is the kind that earns you a silent disappearing act followed by a "don't ask about the gardener" look from other staff. Should I report it? He considers. If it's a janissary plot, you won't live long enough to finish the sentence. Lovely. Or, he says, you play dumb, keep your head down and wait. Let the palace rats chase each other. You mull that over while sipping the tea he pours, strong, bitter, slightly earthy. It tastes like survival. A moment of calm passes. Then Harun leans back and says, "Want to know something actually scandalous?" "Always." He grins. The Valide Sultan is coming to check her roses. You choke on your tea. She never visits the garden. Exactly, which is why I'm worried. She asked specifically for the South Rose Aisle, the one with the trellis arch and the marble fountain. You stare at him. That's my section today. Exactly, he repeats, eyes twinkling. You groan and drop your head onto the stone table. She'll arrive just after the afternoon prayer, Harun continues, probably with 6 attendants and at least 1 astrologer, which reminds me. Don't say Mars. Jupiter, actually. You down the rest of the tea, stand up, and stretch until your spine sounds like a xylophone. All right, time to go prepare for judgment by royal matriarch. He waves. Wear clean shoes, she notices. You glance at your sandals. They're covered in moss, petal pulp, and probably regret. You don't change them. As you head toward the rose aisle, you can already hear 2 apprentices arguing near the spice sheds about the proper way to store dried dill. You sidestep them and slip through the carved gate that leads into the Valide Sultan's chosen corner of the garden. This part is different, subtler. The roses here are older, some of the bushes dating back nearly a century. They don't bloom for show. They bloom because they belong. Deep reds, pale pinks, soft whites, some curling on the edges like parchment. This is not the section for experimentation. This is the section of memory. You grab a soft brush and begin dusting the petals, removing any lingering pollen or debris. You straighten the path, flick fallen leaves into the bushes, and refill the little brass water basins tucked beside the benches. Everything must be perfect, or as close to perfect as a gardener can make in 30 minutes without divine backup. Then you spot it, a suspicious patch of rot near the base of a trellis rose. You crouch, poke gently with a stick, and wince. Fungal blight. No, not today, not here. You look around, then do what every gardener eventually does in a crisis. You fake it. You pull a small cluster of clover from the herb beds, crush it into a pulp, mix it with a splash of vinegar from your flask, and smear it over the infected roots. Not a real cure, but it masks the scent and darkens the soil enough to disguise the rot. Temporary illusion, long enough for a royal walk-by. As you finish, the bells chime from the minaret, marking the late afternoon prayer. And from beyond the cypress hedge, you hear it. Silk rustling, attendants murmuring, and the distinct clack of a mother who rules the inner palace with her fan more than most men do with swords. The Valide Sultan is on her way. You wipe your hands on your sash and take position near the fountain, hands behind your back, heart pounding like a festival drum. You've dodged astrologers, turf wars, and tulip tantrums today. But this might be your biggest challenge yet. The first thing you see is the fan. Not the Valide Sultan herself. Oh no, that would be far too direct. Instead, her ivory fan precedes her like a royal flag, fluttering delicately in the air, held by one of her attendants like it deserves its own military rank. Then comes the sound of embroidered slippers brushing across marble, a scent of rose attar so concentrated you momentarily forget which century you're in, and the hush that falls over the garden like a silk veil. You drop into a bow so deep your knees crack. That's fine. You didn't need cartilage anyway. She pauses before the archway trellis, where the oldest climbing rose, known in whispers as the widow's kiss, curls upward in defiance of time. You remain bowed, staring at your sandals and silently apologizing to them for not changing them like Harun suggested. Finally, she speaks. Stand, gardener. Her voice is soft but undeniable, like a breeze you can't argue with. You rise slowly, eyes lowered. She is dressed in layered silks the color of evening embers, and her veil, though sheer, adds a sense of mystery even as her eyes take in the entire garden in one sweep. "It smells like it should," she says. "Not too sweet, not too desperate." "Thank you, Your Grace," you say, though you're not entirely sure if that's a compliment or a coded warning. She steps forward, fingers trailing over the petals as if she's listening to them more than touching them. Her attendants fan out in a semicircle behind her. One of them holds a folded chair, another carries a pitcher of rosewater. The third has a hawk. Why, you do know. Probably just in case she gets bored and wants to release it at someone. Then, quite suddenly, she sits on the marble bench beneath the rose arch and looks at you directly. "Tell me," she says, "do you believe in talking to plants?" You blink. "Well, I mean, I don't not believe in it." One corner of her mouth lifts. "Good, because the roses tell me things." That's either the beginning of a beautiful friendship or your last conversation before being turned into fish food. She gestures at the trellis. "That one was my mother's. She tended it when she was still a girl here, before she was given to the Sultan, before I was born." You nod slowly. "It's the strongest of the batch." "It is," she says, because she whispered her secrets into it. You consider asking if the rose has passed them on to her, but decide that might be how people end up assigned to latrine duty in winter. She stands again and walks along the path, pausing at a pale yellow bloom. "This one leans," she says. "Fix it." "Yes, Your Grace." "And this bench needs sanding. My robes catch on the corner." You nod, "Of course." She leans in slightly. "Did you know they used to bury gold coins beneath rose bushes?" You did not. "It was believed to encourage prosperity in the household," she continues. "I asked once if that included concubines. The court scholar blushed for an hour." She chuckles at the memory, then her tone sharpens. "But no coins here. Why?" You pause. "Perhaps the gardener before me didn't believe in fortune rituals." She looks at you for a moment, eyes unreadable. "Well, let's see if you're more imaginative." With that, she and her procession sweep away, leaving you alone beside the widow's kiss rose and its whispering vines. You exhale, only now realizing how tightly you'd been holding your breath. You turn to inspect the trellis once more, running your hand along the base. No coins, no hidden tokens, but a small, carved wooden disc catches your eye, tucked just beneath the rose's lowest stem. You pick it up. It's a garden marker, smoothed with age, engraved with a tulip and the initials HM. You pocket it gently. Maybe it meant something once. Maybe it still does. But you don't have time to dwell, because just as you step toward the next bed, a loud squawk erupts from beyond the cypress hedge, followed by a high-pitched scream and the unmistakable flutter of feathered chaos. "Oh no, not again." You break into a sprint, feet slapping over sandstone as the scream escalates from mildly startled to could be a murder. You round the corner into the inner menagerie path, just in time to see a fully grown peacock standing triumphantly atop a fruit cart, wings flared like a feathery tyrant. One of the kitchen boys is on the ground, eyes wide with terror, clutching a single mango like it's a holy relic. The peacock lets out another shriek. You spring into action, waving your arms. You move like a shadow now. Not because you're trying to be mysterious, though let's admit, you kind of are, but because the light is gone and with it, the certainty of what counts as a path and what counts as ankle-snapping shrubbery. The palace gardens at dusk are something else entirely. The lavender looks purple-blue instead of pink-purple. The fountains go quiet like they're holding their breath, and even the birds seem to pause mid-song. A different kind of hush settles over the air, a hush that says, "This isn't the same garden anymore." You head toward the reflecting pool, not because Harun said so. He didn't say anything really, but that's exactly the point. Silence is your compass now. You remember the phrase from the embroidered cloth. water the silence at dusk. So, like a very polite burglar, you retrace your steps back through the abandoned arches and ivy-covered lanes until you stand before the cracked pedestal again. The opening beneath it is still there, slightly ajar, like a book daring you to turn the next page. You crouch, remove the cloth bundle again, and unfold the map. A soft breeze tugs at the corners, like the wind is trying to help. You trace the line from the pedestal to a location marked with a simple almond blossom and a red X. It's just beyond the old spice sheds, somewhere you've never been. And apparently, that's where the next step lies. You tuck the map away and start walking. You don't speak, you don't hum, you don't even scold the tortoise when it tries to race you again. The spice sheds are quieter than ever. Normally, they'd smell like coriander and cardamom, and whatever's fermenting badly in the common jars, but tonight, there's barely a scent. You round the farthest corner and find it. A circular stone mosaic set into the ground. You've walked past it before, but now it hums under your feet. Not with sound, again, not literal humming, but your bones notice it. The air around it is cooler, quieter, like someone left the door open to another time. In the center is a small spout, an ancient watering fixture, long dried up. You kneel, remove the water flask from your sash. You'd forgotten it was even there. And you pour. Just a little. A few trickles into the stone groove. The water vanishes instantly, absorbed like ink on silk. Then click. The mosaic shifts. Slowly, silently, it begins to rotate. Not much, just a hand's width, but enough. The outer ring slides open, revealing a narrow stairwell spiraling downward into darkness. You don't hesitate. You've come this far. You've survived flower politics, royal glances, tortoise side-eyes, and one very aggressive peacock. What's a little shadow stairway compared to that? You step inside. The air changes. It's colder, damp, and tinged with old smoke and myrrh. You descend carefully, your fingers brushing the curved walls, feeling the centuries worn into the stone. And when you reach the bottom, the world opens. You enter a chamber unlike anything above ground. Vines cover the walls, blooming in complete darkness with flowers that glow faintly blue. Not brightly, just enough to suggest their shape. Their petals look almost translucent, like candlelight frozen mid-flicker. This is a garden that was never meant for sunlight. You step forward. There are rows of plants you don't recognize, twisting vines, clustered blossoms, mosses that pulse slightly underfoot. Some of them sway as you pass. Others remain perfectly still, like they're pretending to be something they're not. In the center of it all is a reflecting basin filled with black water. Not dirty, just dark, like obsidian melted into liquid. You stand before it, and for a while nothing happens. You breathe, you listen. You still don't speak. Then, slowly, ripples begin to dance across the surface of the water. Shapes rise, not reflections, visions, moments. You see the Valide Sultan, younger, standing in this very place, whispering to a plant you don't recognize. She wears the same ring you found earlier, the almond blossom crest gleaming on her finger. You see another figure, an old gardener in rags, pressing a scroll into a hidden alcove. Then Hassan. You gasp. He's here too in the vision, but younger, laughing with someone, holding a torch. You understand now. The garden doesn't just choose. It remembers. Every person who's ever stood here, who's ever answered its call, who's ever listened, it holds them, like seeds, waiting for them to bloom again in memory. The water stills, and now your own face reflects back. You, just you. And somehow that feels enough. A low sound, like a sigh made of wind, echoes through the chamber. Then from behind the moss-covered wall, a door slides open. Not carved, grown. And standing in the threshold is a figure in dark green robes, hood drawn, face shadowed. They raise a hand, slowly, deliberately, and beckon. You don't speak. You nod once, and follow them into the green. You follow the figure into the darkness, deeper than any gardener should go, unless that gardener apparently is you. The door closes behind you with a soft thud. No lock, no bolt, just a silence so complete it presses against your ears. You blink, expecting pitch black, but the chamber ahead glows faintly, phosphorescent moss lining the stone like sleepy constellations. The robed figure doesn't speak, just walks. Barefoot, you realize, as their feet make no sound on the moss-batted floor. You try to imitate their silence, but your sandals make the faintest squish with every step. Graceful entrances have never been your strength. The tunnel opens into a domed chamber, round, enormous, and entirely underground, and yet full of life. You stop in awe. It's a subterranean greenhouse, but not the humid glass and copper kind. No, this feels more like a dream someone once had of a perfect, quiet forest and then tucked it beneath a palace. Plants you've never seen before grow along the walls in precise, mirrored symmetry. Blossoms that look like bells. Trees with bark that shifts in pattern as you watch. A carpet of velvety moss stretches across the ground in curving spirals, forming shapes you can't quite decipher. At the very center, a circle of 7 stone seats, empty, waiting. The figure stops just short of the circle, then finally turns. They lower their hood. It's Hassan. Of course it's Hassan. You stare at him, open-mouthed. He sighs, I told you to be careful. You blink, you're the keeper. No, he says, I was once. Your knees feel wobbly, so you sit, uninvited, on a flat stone nearby. Why didn't you tell me? He folds his arms. Because the garden doesn't listen to words, it listens to choices. I couldn't give you this path. You had to wander onto it. You rub your face. You warned me. I warned you because you deserve to know what this place demands. You look around the chamber, the plants, the echoes of ancient rituals that hum in the floor. And what does it demand? He hesitates. Then honesty, listening, stewardship, secrets. You frown. That's not very specific. No, he says, it's not. You gesture vaguely at the glowing fungi and whispering vines. So, what is this? What is this order? He walks toward the circle and sits in one of the stone chairs. We are the garden's memory, he says softly. The ones who tend what the world forgets. Hidden truths, dangerous facts, buried history. People think palaces are built on power, but really, they're built on forgetting. You stare, that sounds ominous. It is. He leans forward. When a prince goes missing, who remembers? When a concubine whispers something true and vanishes the next morning, who holds that story? When a scribe copies the wrong map, on purpose, who buries the real one under rosemary? You feel the weight of your sash, the map, the scrolls, the handkerchief, the coin. You've been testing me, you murmur. No, he says, the garden has, I just watched. You glance around. So what now? I sit here and glow with purpose. He smiles faintly. No, you tend, you listen, you protect. To what? To everything. The whole palace is rooted in these walls. You know the stories told above ground, the parades, the decrees, the rose petal syrup. But here, this is where the stories sleep, where they bloom again when someone's finally ready to water them. You exhale, slow and shaky. Does anyone know? He raises an eyebrow. Of course not, that's the point. You lean back against the cool stone and take a deep breath. The air down here is thick with earth and memory, but oddly comforting, like the underside of a tree during rain. Then you notice the vines creeping toward you, not threatening, just inquisitive. One brushes your ankle and pauses, another curls beside your hand. You touch it. A pulse. A slow, rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat. Hassan nods. It recognizes you now. What does that mean? It means, he says, standing again, that you're in the circle. The garden sees you. You're part of the memory. You look around the domed space once more. So, who are the other seats for? He shrugs. Some were filled long ago. Some will be filled again. The garden always knows when to call someone new. You stand, finally brushing moss from your knees. And if I don't want this? He pauses. Then you forget. You walk back up. The tunnel closes. You return to pruning basil and chasing peacocks. Nothing more. You consider that, the simplicity of it, the relief. And yet you think of the map, the rows whisper, the coins, the scrolls. And you know. You can't unknow this. Even if you walk away, you'd always hear the vines whispering your name in the wind. So you ask quietly, what do I do now? Hassan walks toward you, places something into your palm. It's a seed. Round, smooth, not from any plant you've ever seen. You plant it, he says, tonight. You turn it in your fingers. Where? He smiles, where silence blooms. Of course. You look up. The moss glows brighter now, like it's watching. You tuck the seed into your sash. The sash groans a little under the weight of destiny, but it holds. Then, without speaking again, you leave the chamber. The path winds back in reverse, the air warmer now, the silence more familiar, like an old friend, like a waiting field. And as you emerge back into the nighttime garden, moonlight brushing the lavender and stars blinking just beyond the cypress trees, you realize you were always meant to be here. Not just a gardener, a guardian. You don't go back to your quarters that night. You don't scrub your hands, change into your sleeping robe, or do the usual pre-bed routine of muttering threats at your aching knees. No. You walk silently to the place where silence blooms. The pedestal, the dry reflecting pool, the patch of ivy you once dismissed as garden overgrowth, the place where things started whispering. The moon hangs heavy above you, spilling silver across the old stones. It's a first quarter moon, the same phase mentioned in the first real scroll. That's not a coincidence. Nothing is anymore. You kneel at the base of the pedestal. Remove the seed from your sash. It hums faintly in your palm, almost warm now. Or maybe that's just the blood rushing through your fingers. You dig a shallow hole in the soft earth beneath the vines. No ceremonial dagger, no fancy spade, just your fingers and the dirt, the way gardeners have always done it, as if you're reaching back through centuries to plant something for all of them too. You lower the seed in, cover it gently, and then nothing. No flash of light, no blooming explosion, just quiet. And then you hear it. Welcome. Not out loud. Not in your head. Somewhere in between. You stand slowly, heart pounding, and realize the vines around the pedestal have shifted. Very slightly, but enough. They're forming a shape now, curling upward into a delicate spiral. Not menacing, more like a gesture, a shrug, a smile in plant form. You step back and look up at the stars again. The wind is barely moving, but it's different, like it's making room. The garden is acknowledging you. You are now, undeniably, part of its roots. The next few days feel odd. Not bad, not tense, just tilted, as if the palace sits half a degree off its usual axis and only you can tell. You go about your work as always. You prune. You water. You dodge the steward's temper tantrums about soil acidity. You retrieve a missing tortoise from the apothecary wing where it somehow got into a barrel of fennel seeds and caused minor chaos. But all the while, you notice things. A concubine humming a tune that matches the pattern of the almond blossom tiles near the rose wall. A servant dropping a scroll behind a pomegranate urn and casually walking away. Even the cats seem to bow slightly when you enter a courtyard now. You don't say anything, You don't ask questions. But the garden keeps answering. At dusk on the third day, Harun finds you tending the sage bed. "Anything sprout yet?" he asks casually, though he's holding a jug of mulberry wine instead of tools. "Nothing I can see," you reply, "but I've started dreaming in vine patterns." He nods. "That means it's working." "Do you ever stop being vague?" "Nope." He hands you the jug. You sit together under the fig arbor as twilight settles in, sipping quietly. "So what happens next?" you ask after a while. "More tests?" He shakes his head. "No, tests are for the uncertain. The garden already knows what you'll do." You blink. "Is that reassuring? I can't tell." He smiles. "It means the work begins." You exhale slowly. "What kind of work?" "Watching, listening, intervening quietly. We don't change history, gardener, we nudge it. We remember the parts others forget." "Sounds like a lot." "It is." You sip again. "Why me?" He shrugs. "Maybe because you noticed the moss in the fountain's ear." "That's absurd." "It's a mossy palace. Absurd is normal." You chuckle, then go quiet again. And in that silence, the wind shifts. Harun looks at you. "Did you feel that?" You nod. "Because you did. The same way you felt the seed hum in your palm. The same way you felt the scrolls tug at your attention. The same way you now feel the garden pulse, beneath your feet, behind every vine, in every petal. Alive. Calling." You leave the jug with Harun, stand, and walk the path toward the cypress trees, feet moving on instinct. And waiting there at the edge of the citrus grove is someone you don't expect. The Valide Sultan. Alone. No attendants, no fan, no hawk. She turns when you approach and studies you in the moonlight. "I see it," she says simply. You hesitate. "See what?" "The shift in your posture, the way the garden speaks through your eyes now." You feel the vines rustle nearby. "I suspected," she says, "even when you were just another sap-stained worker, but now you've crossed the threshold." You lower your gaze, unsure what to say. She smiles faintly. "You think I wasn't chosen too, once?" Your head snaps up. She turns and runs her fingers along the bark of an ancient orange tree. "This place, it never forgets its children." You exhale. "What did you You wake up in the rosemary bed. Technically, you weren't asleep. You were meditating, watching the stars, communing with ancient plants, but the snoozing tortoise on your chest says otherwise. You sit up slowly, brushing off fragrant sprigs and trying not to disturb your new reptilian friend. He slides off you with minimal grace and goes in search of breakfast. You could learn a lot from that tortoise's lifestyle. Morning is soft and golden, the kind that paints the Topkapi Palace in gentle light and makes even the grumpiest steward sigh wistfully before yelling at someone. But today is different. You feel the weight of something waiting. You check on the pedestal. The seed has not sprouted. Yet. But the moss has grown around it in a perfect circle. No other part of the garden shows such precision. It's as if the earth itself is protecting what lies beneath, nurturing it. You return to your duties, official ones. There's weeding in the ornamental thyme beds, a quick intervention involving a cat stuck in a grapevine trellis, and a request from the harem to deliver freshly picked jasmine. Normal tasks, familiar rhythms. But everywhere you go, things look sharper. People greet you with slightly more formality. One servant accidentally bows. A guard at the west gate makes eye contact and nods ever so slightly. It's not that they know. It's that they sense. You return to the herb spiral by late morning, only to find Harun already there, humming a tune with no melody. He looks up as you arrive and hands you a folded scrap of parchment. No seal, no flourish, just plain paper and 6 handwritten words. East wall sunset, bring no tools. You look at him. He shrugs. Don't ask me, this one wasn't from me. Your stomach knots slightly. Then who? The garden, he says, obviously. You wait for a punchline. None comes. You spend the rest of the day doing your tasks with the precision of someone preparing for a mysterious meeting on the east wall at sunset. You even wash your hands, twice, which hasn't happened since the peacock soap incident. When the time comes, you slip quietly away and make your way toward the eastern edge of the palace gardens. It's a narrow section, overshadowed by tall walls and mostly ignored except by bees and bored junior scribes. The ground is paved in cracked stone, and ivy clings lazily to the perimeter. You reach the wall just as the last gold light bleeds over it. No one is there. You wait. 10 seconds. A minute. 2. Then the light shifts, and something behind the ivy moves. You step forward, push aside the vines, and reveal what looks like a door. No hinges, no handle, just a clean rectangular outline flush with the stone. You press your palm against it. A soft click. It swings inward. The passage beyond is narrow, stone-lined, slightly damp, and lit with faint golden glimmers that seem to pulse from within the walls themselves, like glowworms but smarter. You enter. You don't question anymore. The passage leads to a vaulted chamber, smaller than the dome below the pedestal, but filled with the scent of crushed sage and honeyed cedar. And seated at the center are 3 figures. You recognize one immediately, the Valide Sultan. Another is a hunched man in garden robes, older than the palace bricks, with hands stained permanent green. The third is no one you know, but they wear a ring, the almond blossom crest. And when they speak, the chamber stills. You have been seen, they say. You nod. You have been trusted. You breathe. You must now choose. You pause. Choose what? To forget, says the Valide Sultan gently, or to stay, to become part of the root. You already know your answer. It's been blooming inside you for days. I'll stay. The old man smiles. The unknown figure gestures. A vine rises from the floor between you, coils once, twice, and lays a small flower at your feet. You pick it up. It's not like anything you've seen before, not in this palace, not in this century. It glows faintly, and in its center, your own initials etched in green gold filament. What is it, you ask? Your memory, says the Valide, planted here so you never get lost. You press the flower to your heart. It dissolves, not with fire or flash, just warmth, like a sunrise inside your ribs. The light in the chamber softens. You are guided out without words, back to the east wall, back into the ivy. The door closes behind you. Gone. And you walk away, back into the night garden, back into the world that will never know who you are now. But you know, and so does the soil. You are the keeper of silence, of stories, of bloom. And the garden is finally whole. You sleep that night finally. Not deeply, not entirely at peace. Your body still aches from days of crouching and creeping, and your mind is a vineyard of tangled thoughts. But it's the kind of rest that feels earned, dreamless, warm, like the garden itself has tucked you in. At dawn, you wake with a start. Something's different. You rise, wrap your robe tightly, and step outside into the cool morning. The air carries a sharpness, wet leaves, new shoots, a faint trace of citrus blossom. You walk to the pedestal. The seed has sprouted. A single green shoot pokes from the earth, curling upward like it knows exactly where it's going. Around it, the moss has arranged itself in 7 concentric rings, each slightly different in color. You didn't plant those. The garden did. You kneel beside it, fingers grazing the soil. It's alive and watching. The rest of your morning unfolds in a strange blur. Officially, You're supposed to assist in preparing the central court for a diplomatic visit. Unofficially, you're trying not to blurt out things like, "Did you know the palace has a memory garden beneath it?" while handing someone shears. The steward is in rare form, flapping through the citrus grove with a parchment list that grows longer by the minute. You're told to sweep the marble paths again because the prince might notice dust. You're also told to stand behind the ambassador's tent in case a tree sheds something embarrassing. You smile, nod, and sweep. But in your head, you're reading the map again. Mid-morning brings an unexpected visitor, the palace librarian. She approaches you beside the basil trough, her sleeve singed slightly from some recent archival misadventure. You're the gardener, yes. You nod warily, usually. She glances around, then reaches into her robes and produces a slim book bound in violet leather. It's unmarked. She hands it to you with both hands. Someone left this in the almond scroll stack. I believe it's meant for you. You hesitate, why me? She shrugs. It smells like rosemary, you always do. You accept it and watch her disappear around the colonnade. You open the book. Blank pages at first. Then in the center. This is the keeper's journal. Write only what the garden knows. No signature, no instructions, but your fingers tingle. You tuck it away in your sash. The sash, at this point, is starting to develop a personality of its own. As the sun climbs, the mood in the palace shifts. You feel it first in the citrus grove, where a branch that's never flowered before suddenly bursts with bloom. Then near the northern fountain, where a white rose with no scent, her rose, grows an inch taller. It's like the garden is celebrating. Or preparing. You move through the day with quiet precision, speaking less, hearing more. At the fig arbor, you overhear a guard mutter. They say the valet hasn't aged in 10 years. At the herb spiral, a cook whispers, there's always a new gardener, but somehow it's the same eyes. Even the cats have begun to regard you with what might be reverence or annoyance, hard to say with cats. You water the rosemary. You trim the jasmine. You pause in the middle of the cypress path because something feels off. Then notice a fallen beam above the archivist's walkway and shout just in time to stop a scholar from becoming a very flat footnote. The day ends as it began, with silence. But this time it's welcoming. You return to the pedestal after sunset. The sprout is taller now, broader, and a single petal, almond-shaped pale green, has begun to uncurl. You press your fingers to the soil just beside it. And you hear it. Not a voice, not a whisper. A recognition. Like a garden nodding. You take out the journal, turn to the first page, and begin to write. Today the garden bloomed without permission. The air smelled like old truths. And I remembered why I stayed. The ink dries fast. The words sink in. The page curls slightly at the edge as if approving. A breeze passes through the courtyard. It carries the scent of lavender and the distant, smoky breath of the torches from the upper walkways. The palace continues above, glittering and loud. But down here in the soil, something older lives. And it has your name now. You rise, brushing earth from your knees. And as you walk back toward your quarters, torchlight guiding your steps, the fig leaves rustle behind you. As if saying, "We see you." And for the first time, you don't flinch. You wake before the sun. Not because anyone summons you. Not because there's a rooster, although somewhere in the distance, one is most definitely auditioning for an opera. No, this time it's the garden. You feel it. The air carries that electric stillness, the kind that comes just before a thunderstorm or an important decision. You dress slowly, deliberately. You reach for your sandals, then stop and leave them behind. Barefoot feels right today. The stone paths are cool beneath your feet as you move through the palace grounds. The world is quiet, suspended between the hush of night and the stirrings of morning. You walk past the citrus grove, past the spiral of mint and thyme, past the pedestal. All of it feels familiar now, not in the way of routine, but like skin, like you were always meant to move through this place. As you approach the east wall, the ivy-covered one where the door had opened days ago, you stop. The ivy is blooming. Tiny white blossoms, fragrant like night air and old parchment, curl along the edges. There's no wind, and yet the flowers tremble. The door opens again, silently. You step through. This time, you are not nervous. You are not curious. You are ready. Inside, the chamber is exactly as you left it. Round, still, lit by the golden moss that pulses in soft patterns across the stone walls. But this time, the 3 seats are filled. The Valide Sultan, the old gardener, and the hooded figure you still haven't met. They don't speak. Instead, a small box rests at the center of the chamber. Simple, wooden, no lock, no key. You kneel. You open it. Inside is a small, smooth stone, dark green veined with silver, familiar somehow. You lift it and turn it in your palm. Then you remember. It's the same kind of stone embedded in the old palace fountain, the one whose water only flowed at dusk, the one you used to scrub each morning before the visitors arrived. You thought it was just decoration, but it was a signal, a marker. You hold the stone close, and then you are asked a single question. Not aloud, just a sensation, a weight in the air that settles into a single shape. Will you guard what others forget? You don't hesitate. You nod. The stone warms in your hand. The ivy blossoms outside the chamber fall all at once, like soft confetti. And just like that, your time as apprentice ends. You are no longer a gardener who listens. You are a keeper who remembers. The others rise and walk toward you. The Valide Sultan bows, not deeply but with intent. The old gardener smiles without teeth and clasps your shoulder. And the hooded figure. They vanish, gone in a blink, as if they were never there. Or maybe they were you in another time. Memory loops are tricky like that. You return to the surface with the sun. The palace is waking. Lanterns are being put out. Birds are arguing over breakfast crumbs. A steward is already threatening someone about linen folds. But you walk past it all. You return to the garden. The pedestal. The sprout. It's now a full plant, tall, slender, and bearing 3 pale green flowers that pulse faintly when touched. You take the journal from your sash and sit beside it. And you write. It is done. I am the garden now. Then you close the journal. Place it beside the plant. And rise. You walk through the palace grounds, unseen and yet deeply known. You move with the rhythm of roots and petals and stories that bloom underground. You are no longer simply the one who tends. You are the one who remembers. And memory is sacred. You pass Harun near the basil trough. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. He just tips his tea slightly in your direction. And grins. You smile back. Because now you understand. There is no final test. No coronation. Just work. Quiet, vital, eternal. And you are ready. You return to the rosemary beds and begin your morning pruning. Because even keepers need clean edges. The garden hums softly around you. Alive. Listening. Watching. And now thanks to you. Remembering. And now the sun has set on your Ottoman day. The garden sleeps. The palace quiets, its marble bones humming with memory, as the air cools and settles like silk on the skin. You stretch out your legs in the soft grass near the fig arbor, fingers still tinged with earth, heart still buzzing from things too old and too vast to name. The torchlight flickers gently across stone paths. A tortoise settles beside you, dozing without care. Even the peacocks, somewhere distant, have decided to finally stop shouting. Above, the sky deepens into velvet. Stars blink on, one by one. And so do the memories, blooming softly inside your mind. You did it. You wandered the palace as a quiet apprentice, stumbled into a conspiracy of petals and secrets, and emerged, perhaps by accident, perhaps by fate, as someone chosen. The garden saw you, and in the still hush between midnight and dawn, it welcomed you home. So let your breath slow now. Let your thoughts drift like rose petals on a pond. You are safe. You are remembered. And the garden is watching over you, just as you watch over it. Sweet dreams, keeper. Tomorrow, the rosemary will still need trimming. Sweet dreams.